I was standing at the airport with my suitcases, waiting for my son with tickets for our family vacation, when he called, "Dad, we're already on the plane. You're not coming." I heard Sophia, his wife, giggling softly in the phone. My hands were trembling with resentment, but at that moment I realized that they would regret it. This is a story about how my life was turned upside down, but before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening from in the comments. I stood in the middle of Richmond International Airport, the terminal buzzing like a hive. My old suitcase, its handle worn smooth from years of use, sat heavy by my feet. The air smelled of burnt coffee from a nearby kiosk, and a garbled voice crackled over the loudspeaker, announcing a flight to Seattle. I checked my watch, 9:17 a.m. Mark should have been here by now, tickets in hand, ready for our family vacation to Miami. My fingers tapped nervously against my phone, the screen blank. Where was he? I shifted my weight, the ache in my knees reminding me of my 65 years. The crowd surged around me. A woman dragging a toddler, a businessman barking into his earpiece, a group of teenagers laughing over their phones. I scanned their faces, searching for Mark's familiar jawline, his quick stride. Nothing. My stomach twisted, but I pushed it down. He was probably stuck in traffic. Or maybe Sophia had slowed him down. She was always fussing over her makeup or her outfits. The phone buzzed in my hand, sharp and sudden. Mark's name lit up the screen. I exhaled, relief flooding me, and pressed it to my ear. "Hey, son, where are you? I've been waiting by the check-in desks." A pause. Too long. Then his voice, flat and cold, cut through the line. "Dad, we're already on the plane. You're not coming." My breath caught, like someone had punched me in the chest. The terminal's noise faded, the world narrowing to the phone pressed against my ear. "What? What do you mean? I'm not coming." My voice cracked, betraying me. I gripped the suitcase handle, the leather creaking under my fingers. Another pause. Then Sophia's voice, soft and venomous, slipped through the background. "We'll finally have a vacation without this old man." A giggle followed, sharp as a blade. My hands trembled, the phone nearly slipping from my grip. I opened my mouth to speak, but Mark cut me off. "Look, Dad, it's better this way. You just slow us down. We'll talk when we're back." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed my ear, its blank screen staring back at me. The terminal roared back to life, announcements, footsteps, laughter, but it felt distant, like I was underwater. My chest burned, a mix of shock and rage. They were on the plane I'd paid for, the vacation I'd planned, down to the last detail, dreaming of sunlit beaches and my son's rare smile. And they'd left me behind like I was nothing. Sophia's words echoed in my skull, "Without this old man." I forced my legs to move, dragging the suitcase behind me. Its wheels squeaked, a pathetic sound against the polished floor. People parted around me, their faces a blur. I passed the coffee kiosk, the scent now sour in my nose, and headed for the exit. My fingers fumbled in my coat pocket, brushing against the house keys I'd tucked there that morning. Cold metal, solid and real, unlike my son's promises. Outside, the air was sharp, April's chill biting through my jacket. A line of yellow taxis idled at the curb, their drivers chatting in clusters. I raised a hand and one peeled away, pulling up beside me. The driver, a wiry man with a gray beard, hopped out and grabbed my suitcase. "Rough morning?" he asked, tossing the bag into the trunk. I didn't answer, just slid into the back seat. The door slammed shut, sealing me in with the faint smell of pine air freshener. My hands were still shaking, knuckles white as I clenched them in my lap. Sophia's giggle played on a loop in my head, each note fueling the fire in my chest. They thought they could humiliate me, discard me like an old coat, but they were wrong. The driver climbed in and glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Hey, buddy, you okay? Where are we headed?" I stared out the window, the airport shrinking behind us. My reflection flickered in the glass. Gray hair, lined face, eyes harder than I'd ever seen them. They'd regret this. All of it. "Kinda need a destination," the driver said, his voice light but curious. I unclenched my fists, the keys in my pocket digging into my thigh. "Home," I said, my voice low and steady. "Take me home." The taxi hummed along the highway, rain streaking the windows like tears. Richmond's skyline blurred in the distance, a gray smear against the April sky. I sat in the back seat, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the house keys in my pocket pressing into my thigh. The driver's radio played a soft jazz tune, barely audible over the patter of rain and the occasional squeak of the wipers. The air smelled of worn leather and faint cigarette smoke clinging to the seats. I stared at the water sliding down the glass, my mind replaying Mark's voice. "You're not coming." "Hey, you sure you're okay back there?" The driver's voice broke through, warm but cautious. I glanced at the rearview mirror, catching his eyes, brown, creased with concern, framed by a shock of silver hair. His name tag, pinned to a faded jacket, read, "Richard." "I'm fine," I muttered, rougher than I meant. I didn't want to talk. Not to him, not to anyone. But Richard wasn't the type to let silence linger. "Long day, huh? Airport's a madhouse this time of year." He chuckled, adjusting his grip on the wheel. "Dropping folks off, picking them up. Makes me miss my kids. You know they're grown now, scattered across the country. You got family waiting at home?" My jaw tightened. Family. The word stung, sharp as a fresh cut. I thought of Mark's cold tone, Sophia's mocking giggle. My hands curled around the keys in my pocket, their edges biting into my palm. "Something like that," I said, staring out the window. Richard didn't push, but his question hung in the air, stirring memories I didn't want. Mark at 20, his eyes bright as I handed him the keys to his first car, bought with my overtime checks. The way he'd grinned, promising to make me proud. Or the day I paid for his wedding, watching Sophia glide down the aisle in a dress that cost more than my monthly pension. She'd barely thanked me, her smile tight as she whispered to Mark about the old-fashioned venue. My house, the one they lived in, rent-free, was old-fashioned too, according to her. I'd heard her say it last month, her voice dripping with disdain as she stood in my kitchen sipping my coffee. I shifted in the seat, the leather creaking under me. The rain was heavier now, drumming against the roof. I thought of all I'd given them. College tuition, car repairs, the down payment for their honeymoon. And for what? So they could leave me stranded in an airport, laughing like I was some burden they had finally shed? "You ever feel like you gave too much?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, low and raw. Richard glanced back, his brow furrowing. "To family? Hell, all the time. Gave my daughter my old truck when she moved to Seattle. She sold it a month later. Didn't even tell me." He shook his head, but his tone stayed light. "But that's how it goes, right? You give 'cause you love. It doesn't always come back the way you hope." I nodded, my throat tight. Love. I'd loved Mark fiercely, even when he started pulling away, his calls growing shorter, his visits rare. I told myself it was just life, marriage, work, Sophia. But now I saw it clearly. Every sacrifice, every dollar had been a rope they'd used to tie me down, to keep me useful until they didn't need me anymore. The taxi slowed, turning into my neighborhood. The houses here were tidy, their lawns clipped, but the familiarity felt hollow. I leaned my head against the window, the glass cool against my temple. Sophia's voice echoed again. Without this old man. My chest burned, but beneath the hurt something else stirred, something hard and unyielding like the keys in my hand. Richard pulled up to my house, the tires crunching on the wet gravel drive. The two-story colonial loomed ahead, its white paint peeling at the edges, the front porch sagging under years of neglect. My house, my life's work, and they thought they could take it from me. "Home sweet home," Richard said, turning to face me. "That'll be $28.50. I handed him a crumpled 30, waving off the change. "Keep it," I said, my voice steadier now. I stepped out, the rain soaking my coat, and grabbed my suitcase from the trunk. The taxi's engine idled as I stood there, staring at the front door. My fingers closed around the keys, their weight grounding me. Richard leaned out of his window. "Take care, all right? Family stuff? It's never as bad as it seems." I didn't answer, just gave a curt nod. He drove off, the taillights fading into the rain. I turned to the house. My house, the one I built for a family that no longer existed. The keys gleamed faintly in my hand, slick with rain. My eyes narrowed, a quiet resolve settling in my bones. They'd see soon enough. I'd make sure of it. The front door creaked as I pushed it open, the familiar groan echoing in the quiet house. I dropped my suitcase by the threshold, its thud muffled by the faded rug. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and the faint lavender of the cleaner I had used last week. My house. 2 stories of chipped paint and creaky floors. Every inch earned through decades of long shifts and careful saving. Now it felt like a museum of mistakes. Each room holding memories of a family that had turned its back on me. I shuffled to the kitchen, my shoes scuffing the hardwood. The morning's chill clung to my coat, but I didn't bother hanging it up. I flicked on the coffee maker, its low hum filling the silence. While it gurgled, I sank into the old armchair by the window, the springs groaning under my weight. A shelf across the room held family photos. Mark as a boy, grinning with a missing tooth. Our fishing trip when he was 15. His wedding day, where I'd stood proud, ignoring Sophia's tight smile. I stared at the frames, my chest tight. How had it come to this? Mark's voice rang in my head, cold and final. "You're not coming." Sophia's giggle followed, sharp and cruel. "Without this old man." My fingers twitched, itching to smash something, but I gripped the armrests, the wood smooth under my palms. I'd given them everything: college, cars, a roof over their heads, and they'd repaid me with a phone call and a laugh. I stood, pacing the kitchen, my steps heavy. The coffee maker beeped, but I ignored it, my eyes drifting to the keys I'd tossed on the counter. They glinted under the fluorescent light, small but solid. A reminder, this was my house, my life. I wasn't the burden they thought I was. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through contacts. The bank's number stared back at me, a quiet temptation. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I hesitated. Not yet. I needed to think, to plan. I wasn't Mark acting on impulse or Sophia's scheming behind fake smiles. Whatever I did, it would be deliberate, fair. They'd feel it. I wandered to the living room, my hand brushing the back of the couch where Mark used to sprawl, demanding money for some new gadget. "Dad, you don't get it," he'd say, rolling his eyes when I suggested saving. Sophia was worse, her complaints slicing like paper cuts. "This house is so dated," she'd said once, sipping wine I'd paid for. "You should renovate." As if I hadn't poured my life into these walls. I stopped by the fireplace, my gaze landing on another photo. Mark and me at his graduation. I'd worked double shifts to cover his tuition, never complaining. He'd hugged me that day, promising to make me proud. A lie I saw now. My throat burned, but I swallowed it down. No tears, not for them. I thought of their voices in the airport, the ease with which they'd cut me out. They thought I was weak, a pushover who'd keep giving no matter what. They were wrong. I wasn't that man anymore. The man who'd stood in that terminal, shocked and trembling, was gone. In his place was someone else, someone who wouldn't let this go unanswered. I crossed to the window, the curtains rough against my fingers as I pushed them aside. The front yard stretched out, the grass patchy from neglect. Beyond it, the neighborhood was quiet, the rain slowing to a drizzle. I could see Catherine's house next door, her porch light glowing faintly. She'd understand. Maybe she'd lost her husband, faced her own betrayals, but this wasn't her fight. It was mine. My reflection stared back from the glass, eyes sharp and unyielding. I thought of the bank, the accounts I'd set up for Mark, the mortgage I'd paid off alone. They lived here because of me, slept under my roof, ate my food, and they thought they could discard me. No, they'd learn what it meant to cross me. I stepped back, my hand brushing the keys on the counter again. Their weight was a promise, a tether to the life I'd built. I wouldn't let them take it. Not anymore. Enough, I whispered, my voice steady, cutting through the house's silence. I turned from the window, my gaze settling on the yard again. You'll see. They'd taken enough dinners, clothes, that damn trip to Miami I'd funded. No more. I pressed the button. The line clicked, and a calm female voice answered. "First Pacific, this is Emily. How can I assist you?" I cleared my throat, steadying my voice. "This is David Parker. I need to make some changes to my account. Immediately." Emily's tone was professional, unruffled. "Of course, Mr. Parker. Can you verify your account details?" I rattled off the numbers, my eyes drifting to the keys on the desk. They glinted faintly, a reminder of the house I'd built, the life I'd earned, the one they thought they could leech off forever. Emily typed in the background, her keyboard clicking softly. "All right, sir, what changes would you like to make?" "I want to revoke access for my son, Mark Parker, and his wife, Sophia Parker. They're listed as authorized users on my secondary card. I need that stopped now." My words came out harder than I'd meant, but I didn't care. The chair creaked as I leaned forward, my free hand curling into a fist. "I see. Can I ask for clarification? Are you removing their access permanently, or is this a temporary hold?" "Permanent," I said, my voice like steel. "They're not to touch my accounts again." Emily's tone softened just a fraction. "I understand. I'll need to confirm a few details to process this. Can you provide the last 4 digits of the card in question?" I gave her the information, my pulse quickening. Part of me, a small, stubborn part, wanted to hang up, to pretend this wasn't happening. Mark was my son, after all. I'd spent years telling myself his coldness was just a phase, that Sophia's barbs were just her nature. But the airport, that phone call, had shattered the lie. I wasn't their bank. I was their father, and they'd spat in my face. "All right, Mr. Parker," Emily said after a moment. "I've removed Mark and Sophia Parker as authorized users. The change is effective immediately. They won't be able to use the card anymore. Would you like me to send a confirmation email?" "Yes," I said, exhaling. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Is there anything else I can help with?" "No, that's all." I ended the call, the phone heavy in my hand. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the desk. The coffee had gone cold, a thin film forming on its surface. I'd done it. The first step. A strange mix of relief and dread churned in my gut. What would they do when they found out? Scream? Beg? I almost wanted to hear it. I stood, my knees protesting, and crossed to the window. The yard stretched out, patchy and wet, the neighbor's porch light glowing faintly through the mist. Catherine's house. She'd probably be up sipping tea, ready to talk my ear off about her garden. But this wasn't her business. Not yet. My gaze fell back to the keys on the desk. I picked them up, their cool weight grounding me. This house, this life, it was mine, not theirs. I closed my fist around the keys, the edges biting into my palm. Let them feel what it's like to lose something. The phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. A text notification lit up the screen. Mark's name. My heart skipped, but I didn't open it. Not yet. A slow smile crept across my face, sharp and unfamiliar. Let them squirm. I slipped the phone into my pocket and turned back to the window, the keys still in my hand. The rain had stopped, leaving the world quiet and still. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood and old leather, the kind of scent that clung to important decisions. I sat across from Mr. Hargrove, a gray-haired man with a face like weathered oak, his pen scratching notes on a legal pad. The folder of documents I'd brought lay open on his desk, its contents stark and final. Outside, Richmond's downtown buzzed faintly. Car horns, footsteps, the pulse of a city moving on without me. Inside, it was just us, the clock ticking softly on the wall. "So, David," Hargrove said, peering over his glasses, "you're certain about this, removing Mark entirely from the will?" I nodded, my hands folded in my lap. Certain. My voice was steady, but my chest tightened. Mark's face flashed in my mind, his grin at 16 holding up a trout we'd caught together. Then his voice from yesterday, cold and accusing. "You're going to regret this." I pushed the memory away. "He's made his choices." Hargrove raised an eyebrow, his pen pausing. "I have to ask. Family matters can be emotional. If you change your mind later, it's more paperwork. You're sure you want to move forward?" I hesitated just for a second. I thought of Mark's birthday last month, how I'd called and left a voicemail, my voice cheerful, only to get a text back hours later. "Busy, Dad, talk later." No call came. Sophia's words echoed too, sharp and mocking. They didn't deserve my loyalty. Not anymore. "I'm sure," I said, meeting his gaze. "Let's do it." Hargrove nodded, jotting something down. "All right, I'll draft the new will. You'll need to sign it, and we'll need a witness. Should be straightforward." He slid a form across the desk, his pen clicking. "Anything else you want to add? Beneficiaries? Specific requests?" I thought of the house, the keys I'd left on my desk that morning. "The house stays mine. For now, no beneficiaries. I'll decide later." He scribbled again, then looked up. "Fair enough. I'll have this ready by tomorrow. You can come back to sign." I stood, shaking his hand, the folder tucked under my arm. The weight of it felt right, like a shield. As I stepped toward the door, a familiar voice stopped me. "David, is that you?" I turned to see Catherine Thompson, my neighbor, standing in the hallway. Her gray curls were tucked under a scarf, her eyes bright despite the lines around them. She held a paper cup of coffee, the steam curling upward. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice warm but curious. "Catherine," I said, managing a small smile, "just handling some business." Her gaze flicked to the folder, then back to me. "Sounds serious. Got a minute for a coffee? There's a place across the street, my treat." I hesitated, but her warmth was hard to refuse. "Sure," I said, following her out. The lawyer's door clicked shut behind us. the sound sharp in the quiet hall. The cafe was small, its air thick with the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon. We settled at a corner table, the clink of cups and low chatter surrounding us. Catherine sipped her coffee, studying me. "You look like a man with a plan," she said, her tone light, but probing. "Spill it. What's got you hauling folders to lawyers?" I chuckled, but it came out hollow. "It's complicated." "Try me," she said, leaning forward. "I've got my own stories. Did I ever tell you about my cousin? Tried to swindle me out of my house after my husband passed? Family can be a real kick in the teeth." Her bluntness caught me off guard, but it was comforting. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding me. "Mark and Sophia," I started, my voice low. "They crossed a line. I'm making sure they don't do it again." Catherine's eyes narrowed, but not with judgment. "Good for you. People like that, they think they can take and take. You've got to draw a line." She paused, then added, "If you need a hand, I'm here. I'm no lawyer, but I'm nosy and I've got time." I smiled genuinely this time. "I'll keep that in mind." We talked a while longer, her stories pulling me out of my head. But as I walked home later, the folder still under my arm, my thoughts darkened. Catherine was a friend, maybe an ally, but this fight was mine. I turned the corner to my street, the house coming into view, its sagging porch a quiet accusation. Then I froze. A car I didn't recognize. A sleek black sedan was parked in my driveway. Mason's car. Mark's friend. I slowed my steps, my grip tightening on the folder. The air felt heavy, charged. What was he doing here? The living room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a table lamp that cast long shadows across the hardwood. The air smelled of polished wood and the faint lavender of the throw blanket draped over the couch. I sat in my old armchair, a photo album open on my lap. The pages yellowed with time. Mark's face stared back at me from a snapshot. His 10th birthday, cake smeared on his cheeks, his grin wide and unguarded. The memory ached, but I pushed it down, my fingers tracing the edge of the album. A low rumble outside snapped me out of it. Headlights swept across the front windows, tires crunching on the gravel drive. I stood, the album sliding shut with a soft thud, and peered through the curtains. Mason's black sedan sat in my driveway, its engine idling like a crouched animal. My pulse quickened, but I forced my breathing steady. So, they'd sent him, Mark and Sophia's errand boy. The doorbell rang sharp and insistent. I crossed the room, my shoes scuffing the rug, and opened the door. Mason stood on the porch, tall and broad-shouldered, his expensive leather jacket gleaming under the porch light. His smile was all teeth, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Evening, David," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Mind if I come in?" I didn't move, my hand resting on the doorframe. "What do you want, Mason?" His smile tightened, but he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Just a quick chat about Mark and Sophia. You've got them in a bit of a bind, you know." He tilted his head like we were old friends sharing a joke. I kept my expression blank. "They put themselves there. Say what you came to say." Mason chuckled, but it was forced. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "All right, straight to it. The card thing. It's causing problems. They're stuck in Miami. Can't pay for anything. You need to fix it." My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice even. "It's my money, my choice. They don't get to demand anything anymore." His smile vanished, replaced by a hard glint in his eyes. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a growl. "Come on, David.
You don't want to make this messy. Mark's your son. He deserves your help. Always has. I remembered Mason's help years ago, borrowing $500 for a business deal he never repaid. My fingers tightened on the doorframe. He deserves, I said, my voice low and sharp, like you deserve that loan I gave you. Tell Mark he's on his own now. Both of them are. Mason's face darkened, his hands flexing at his sides. You're making a mistake, old man. Mark's not going to let this slide. You think you can just cut him off? He's got plans, and you're not going to like them. I stepped forward, close enough to smell the cologne he doused himself in. Tell him to try me, I said, each word deliberate. Now get off my porch. For a moment, he didn't move. His eyes locked on mine. Then he snorted, stepping back. This isn't over, he said, jabbing a finger at me. You'll see. He turned, striding back to his car, the door slamming as he peeled out of the drive. I shut the front door, the lock clicking with a satisfying snap. My heart was pounding, but a strange calm settled over me. They thought they could bully me, send their lackey to scare me straight. They were wrong. I crossed to the window, pulling the curtain aside to watch Mason's taillights disappear into the night. The neighborhood was quiet. The only sound, the faint chirp of crickets. My gaze drifted to the coffee table where my house keys lay, catching the lamp's light. They gleamed like promise, small but solid. This was my home, my life, and I'd fight for it. I let the curtain fall, the keys shine lingering in my mind. Outside, the darkness seemed to press closer, heavy with what was coming next. I turned the corner to my street, the house coming into view, its sagging porch a quiet accusation. Then I froze. A car I didn't recognize. A sleek, black sedan was parked in my driveway. Mason's car. Mark's friend. I slowed my steps, my grip tightening on the folder. The air felt heavy, charged. What was he doing here? The living room was warm, the scent of fresh coffee curling from the mug in my hands. The lamp cast a soft glow, pooling on the rug, its frayed edges a quiet testament to years of footsteps. Outside, the May evening had settled over Richmond's suburbs, the air cool and heavy with the promise of rain. I sat in my armchair, the new keys in my pocket, a reassuring wait, when a low rumble broke the silence. Headlights flashed across the curtains, tires crunching on gravel. They were back. I stood, setting the mug down, and moved to the window, easing the curtain aside. Mark and Sophia stumbled out of a taxi, their suitcases thudding onto the driveway. Mark's shirt was rumpled, his hair a mess, while Sophia clutched her designer bag like a lifeline, her heels clicking on the pavement. They looked smaller somehow, diminished under the streetlight's harsh glow. I stayed still, my breath steady, watching. Mark fumbled with his keys, his movements jerky, as he approached the front door. The lock didn't budge. He tried again, twisting harder, his shoulders tensing. "What the hell?" he muttered, loud enough to carry through the glass. Sophia stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Try it again, Mark. You're doing it wrong." "I'm not!" he snapped, shoving the key in once more. The door stayed shut, unyielding. He slammed his palm against it, the sound echoing in the quiet night. "Dad, open the damn door!" I didn't move. My pulse quickened, but not from fear. This was it, the moment I'd built toward, the new locks, the boxes, the note. They'd feel every choice they'd made, every word they'd thrown at me. Sophia's giggle from that airport call echoed in my head. Without this old man. Let them see what that meant. Mark pounded again, his voice rising. Dad, I know you're in there. Stop this crap and let us in. Sophia grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. Scream louder you want to. The whole street's watching. Then what do you suggest, he hissed, turning on her. He's locked us out of our own house. It's his house, she shot back, her voice low and venomous. You said he'd never do this. You said he was spineless. Mark's face twisted, but he didn't answer. He kicked the door, the thud dull and futile. Sophia's eyes darted to the side yard, narrowing as she spotted the stack of boxes I'd left there. What's that? She said, her tone shifting to something colder. They moved together, their suitcases abandoned on the grass. I leaned closer to the window, my fingers brushing the curtain's rough fabric. Mark reached the boxes first, yanking one open. Sophia's dresses spilled out, silk catching the light. He froze, then dug through another, pulling out his smartwatch, a pair of shoes. He packed our stuff, he said, his voice cracking. Sophia snatched a note card from the top box, her hands trembling as she read it. Her lips parted, then twisted into a snarl. You don't live here anymore, she read aloud, her voice rising. Your things are behind the house. Clear the yard by tomorrow. She tore the note in half, the pieces fluttering to the ground. That bastard. Mark spun back to the door, his fists hammering. You think this is funny, Dad? Throwing us out like trash? You're heartless. His voice broke, raw and desperate. Sophia joined him, her knock sharp and rhythmic. Dive in, open this door right now. You can't do this to us. I stepped back, letting the curtain fall. Their voices faded to a muffled roar, like a storm raging outside a sealed window. My chest was tight, but not with regret. This was justice, cold and clear. They'd taken my trust, my money, my home for granted. Now they had nothing but their anger and their bags. The phone on the coffee table buzzed, Mark's name flashing. I stared at it, the screen glowing in the dim room. Another buzz, then another. Voicemails piling up. I didn't pick up. I didn't need to hear their excuses. The keys in my pocket felt heavier, grounding me. I turned away from the window, the pounding outside growing fainter, and set the phone down on the table, its light flickering like a dying star. The kitchen was dark, save for the faint glow of a single bulb above the sink. The air smelled of chamomile tea, the kettle still warm on the counter. Outside, the drizzle had started again, streaking the windows and blurring the streetlights. I stood by the living room window, the curtain pulled back just enough to see Mark and Sophia in the yard. Their suitcases sagged under the rain, the cardboard boxes I'd left them collapsing into soggy heaps. Mark's shoulders slumped, his hands stuffed in his pockets. While Sophia paced, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice's sharp murmur. I couldn't make out the words. My phone buzzed again, vibrating against the wooden table. Another voicemail. I picked it up, the screen cold against my palm, and played the message. Mark's voice crackled through, strained and raw. Dad, come on. This is crazy. You can't just lock us out. Where are we supposed to go? Open the door, please. A pause, then quieter. I'm sorry. Okay, let's talk. The next message was Sophia, her tone tight like she was forcing the words out. "Dive in. We messed up, I get it. Can you just let us in? We can work this out, please." Her voice wavered, a crack in her usual polish, but it didn't move me. I'd heard their apologies before. Empty promises to get what they wanted. I set the phone down, my reflection faint in the window. They were still out there. Mark dragging a suitcase toward the curb, Sophia gesturing wildly as she spoke into her phone. I imagined them piling into a taxi, the driver casting curious glances as they directed him to some cheap motel on the edge of Richmond, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and carpets that smelled of mildew. I could picture them in a cramped room, the walls thin, the bed creaking under their weight. Mark would slump on the mattress, his face buried in his hands, while Sophia paced, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "You told me he wouldn't do this," Sophia would hiss, her voice low to avoid the neighbors. "You said he was spineless." Mark would snap back, his patience frayed. "I didn't think he'd go this far, Liv. He's never fought back before. How was I supposed to know?" "You should have known," she'd retort, throwing her bag on the bed. "We're not done. We'll go back tomorrow, beg if we have to. He's got to crack eventually." I blinked, pulling myself back to the kitchen. The image was so vivid, I could almost smell the motel's stale air. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't check it. Their voices, their panic, it was proof of their weakness. They'd built their lives on my generosity. And now, stripped of it, they were floundering. I felt no pity, only a quiet calm, like the stillness after a storm. I poured myself a cup of tea, the steam curling upward, and sat at the table. The wood creaked under my elbows, familiar and solid. My eyes fell on a small note card tucked under a stack of bills. Catherine's handwriting, neat and looping. "Coffee tomorrow. My treat. C." I smiled, the tension in my chest easing. She'd been there through all of this, a steady voice cutting through the noise. Tomorrow I'd tell her everything, share the weight of this victory. The rain tapped against the window, a soft rhythm. I sipped my tea, the warmth spreading through me, and let the note card rest in my hand. Outside, the yard was empty now.